Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, I want to talk to you about an issue with the squats. Not so much an issue. I was asked a question by a student, and I think the student actually kind of knew the answer, but was hoping that I could explain it a little bit better. It's really very simple, very straightforward. It's during a squat, and it has to do with the position of the feet, closer versus wider apart. And the question was, why? And the student, just like me, when I do squats with my feet wide apart, student asked me, why are my inner thighs? Why do I get sore in the inner thigh or the adductors? And I think the answer is pretty obvious. Is that um, when you put your feet wider apart on a squat versus having them close together, the issue with the what part of the quadricep is working, that's a completely different video for another time. But since we're focusing on the inner thigh or why the adductors get more sore, the answer should be obvious. Is that as I put my feet wider apart and I'm doing a squat, so I'm going up and down, right? The wider the feet go, the less stable, believe it or not, the pelvis is. And I'm talking from a lateral movement perspective. So imagine your pelvis, right? So your hip bone, right? So your hips and your pelvis, as the feet go wider apart because of the way the femur bones insert or sit inside the hip joint, the pelvis actually becomes less stable, meaning it's able to kind of twist laterally a lot easier when the femur or the legs go wider apart. You can practice this yourself, by the way. If you stand up and put your feet wide apart and just stand there and bend your knees and kind of go down like you're going to go down into a squat, you can kind of twist your pelvis. It can move back and forth a lot easier. Now bring your feet close together, literally put them close together. And when they're together, you're not able to kind of twist and turn your pelvis laterally within the frontal plane as easy. It's really very simple. It's because of the way the head of the femur, inserts into the socket of the hip, right? And as the femur changes what's known as a Q angle, right, which is simply the positioning of the femur in relation to the straight up and down line of the midline of the body, as it goes out or comes back in, there is more or less stability in the pelvis itself. Do a squat with your feet relatively close together. It's a pretty stable movement on the pelvis. It actually becomes a lot more challenging the closer the feet come together. It's harder to get that pelvis to tilt anteriorly and then sit your hips back. But now put your feet wider apart. And the further apart you go, we used to say this, when in doubt, when doing a squat, if you're unsure of how far apart to put the feet, when in doubt, go out. Because the further out you move your feet, the more sort of mobility you have in the pelvis, right? So the pelvis can kind of move forward and backward and laterally, right? And you can feel it as you move your feet wide apart. And then you can sit down a whole lot easier, more comfortable in the squat. That then tells us something about what is needed. If there's more instability in the joint, right? Generally, you're going to need a greater level of isometric contraction in those muscles that are going to provide stability to the joint. And what muscles provide stability to the hip joint? Well, there's basically four areas, right? There's the anterior portion of the hip, the posterior, there's the lateral or the abductor muscles, and then there are the medial muscles or the adductor muscles. Put the feet wide apart. It demands a greater level of stability by all those muscles, but particularly the adductors. And so, if I know I've taken weeks off from doing squats, and then as soon as I go back after a couple of weeks of not doing squats, because I put my feet relatively wide apart when I train, I will tell you the next day, my inner thigh, my adductors are blisteringly sore. Why? Because the adductors are really incredibly important, powerful stabilizers of the of sort of that pelvis hip complex. when it comes to doing squats. So they have to they're kind of pulling the legs in, the feet as they go wider and wider apart, demand greater tension and load inward to hold them from basically flying apart, so to speak. I guess you can think of it like that. But the further the feet go, the more the adductors are needed to stabilize and hold, right, the pelvis in place. Now, of course, your abductors as well are working, of course, all the muscles are working around the muscle to maintain isometric contraction, stability in the pelvis. It just so happens that it's a big, big area of bone and the joints are large and the muscles all around the hips and the pelvis are very strong, very powerful muscles. It just so happens those adductors, those guys are animals. They are monster muscles. They're very strong. And so they're going to get sore generally the further out you put your feet. I hope that answers the question. Like I say, it's I think it's pretty straightforward to understand that the further the feet go apart, the more tension is going to be generated to hold the feet or to pull the feet, right? Since they're on the ground, pull the feet together, and that puts a tremendous amount of stress and tension on the very muscles that do adduction or the adductors. If you have any questions or related questions on that particular topic, just let us know by putting it in the comment section below. If you understand it, made sense, write the word understand in there as well. If you need help or assistance, just let us know in the comment section. Be more than happy to answer your questions in a video as well. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Also, give us a thumbs up if it was helpful and share it as well. Have a great week. We will see you next week. Thanks.